Hey again! Today we're going to talk about tailoring your game to your target audience. And more than that, figuring out who to target your audience to in the first place. So the first step is, what kind of game do you want to make? A game focused around bloody, gore-ridden battles with lots of details into the visceral, hellish nature of war? A game that's hyper-realistic with tons of number crunching to make sure it's as accurate as possible? One that binds all these concepts together into something with 12 different charts for what happens when you hack off limbs based on various die rolls. Okay, so it looks like you know what you want there in pretty intricate detail. That's good. It's not much of a game I'd be interested in playing, but hey, there's definitely an audience for that. This is where you start doing your research into which groups like to play that kind of a game. As you look through things, you're going to notice a few tiny problems. The people who like lots of number crunching don't tend to overlap all that much with the people who like really gore-ridden stuff. And there's definitely some overlap between these groups, but not a huge one. So, what do you do? Well, you either accept that this is going to be a niche game with a relatively small market and build stuff with that in mind, custom tailoring it towards that particular demographic which enjoys these things. Or you make a few concessions between the two groups, compromising at both ends to widen the player base that will be attracted to such. If we go with the former, you get a rather pure, undistilled game that will make a few people extremely happy. This is usually where you get hardcore cult followings from. Maybe it only appeals to a small group, but that small group absolutely loves what you've given them. Something they probably can't find elsewhere. Yes, I know you can find examples of this in the market already, but it's an example, okay? Just bear with me here. Now, for the second option here, you can expand your audience some to also include more of both of your main groups. But everyone will generally be a bit less happy, a bit less intense detail and emphasis on the gore, and a bit less math and number crunching will make both of those groups a little less pleased with their sides of the equation. But you'll also tend to get a fair bit more both of them that sort of like the game. So, okay, broader audience, but you had to appeal to opposing groups' desires, which are also opposing in nature. No matter what type of game you make, you're going to run into issues like this, where you're going to have to make decisions upon who to please in a given situation. As such, the stuff I keep saying over and over in previous videos, forum posts, on Reddit, in the comment section, and so on, about figuring out what you want to do before you do it, is just so amazingly important. If you know what you're aiming for, then when you hit a decision like this, you can aim consistently for what you want, either appealing to a larger audience or to a more specific group. Maybe you decide the gore thing's where it's at, and anytime you run into a question of whether it'd be better to go into detail over the gore or the math bits, aim for the messy, gristle-ridden bits of the game instead. Great! You know what you want, and you're tailoring the game to that specific audience. So from there, you have an audience already by default. One which likes certain stuff about that genre, about that style of play. That's Good. Learn more about that audience. Figure out what they really enjoy. And just ask them questions. Maybe there's some related stuff they also like which isn't in your game already. But because they like it, well, it's a new source of inspiration that you may not have been tapping into previously. And the very fact that you're making a game for a given audience means you can learn from that audience to add more stuff they'll enjoy. If you have multiple audiences already interested in what you're doing, then look specifically at where they overlap. There's a pretty good chance that there's some nice stuff in there that will make your player base really pleased if you include it. And if multiple audiences that already want to play your game want something, then it's usually pretty often that that something they want fits in pretty well with the nature of the game in the first place. Now, you'll notice I keep pressing the same points here. You're aiming at audiences that already like that kind of game. So you've got the game's rough outline first, and then are broadening its definition based upon who already likes it. There's an alternative method here, which is to pick a large demographic and appeal to their desires, building a game around what they like. This can also work out pretty well for you. What isn't going to work out so well is deciding to make a game for a particular genre and then trying to force fit it to sell to a demographic that has no interest in that genre in the first place. Yeah, I know, that sounds like common sense, yet people do it all the time. And they fail miserably all the time. Why would anyone do that? Why would you even try to take a game that has a group that would want to play it already and make changes to it so that the group which would already want to play it no longer likes it? Also that you can appeal to a different group that isn't going to play it anyway, no matter how many changes you make to it, because that other group simply isn't interested in the first place. And the only way to fix that would be to basically remove it from being that genre entirely. Oh boy. Well, let's look at the most obvious example. Some people are going to hate this one. Tough beans. It's reality, and you're going to have to learn to work within the confines of reality if you want to get anywhere, even if you don't like it. Women. Wow, it's amazing how many people you can piss off with a single word. It's needed though, so let's look at why this happens. Women are a demographic which play games. Yay, that's great. That doesn't mean women unilaterally play the same kinds of games as men do though. Like any given demographic, doesn't matter which one you talk about, that demographic will have some outliers, but it'll also have general trends to it. General trend amongst male players is that they tend to like earning things through challenges. You get them a bigger wall to climb, and they just feel that much better when they overcome it. An opposing trend among female players is that they generally prefer just being given a gold star for showing up and seeing the wall, and then being handed a staircase so that they can bypass the obstacle and get to the story part of the game on the other side. Obviously, this doesn't apply to every member of these two demographics, but they are very large and very noticeable trends when you start studying these groups. And these trends are diametrically opposed. If you appease one group, you're generally going to frustrate the other. If all you do is throw obstacles at your players, your male players will, on average, tend to be pleased with this, while your female players will tend to get progressively more annoyed over time. If all you do is show big scary obstacles and then walk right past them, ignoring them, the girls will typically be happy, and the guys are going to be growing restless for something to do. There's a lot more complexities to it, but you can see very large notable trends in your various groups that play games. If you take that core-ridden game, yeah, there's a few girls that'll like it, but they're the outliers. Expect like a 90 to 95% male population who prefers that game. And then someone's going to look at that and go, hey, there's not enough girls playing this game. We need more women. No, you don't. That's right. You heard me. You don't need more women playing a game type that women don't enjoy. Because they don't enjoy it. Seriously, the women who like that kind of thing will find it and play it anyway, same as any other demographic. If you try to change the game to a point that it might begin attracting more female players, guess what? Yeah, you just change it in such a way that the players who already enjoyed that game type are no longer interested in it, including the female players who already liked it. And what's worse is that with this kind of a change being made, not only did you alienate the player base you had, but the demographic you're aiming for still probably won't care. They still won't want to play your core fest for girls game, no matter how many pretty pink bows you attach to the artwork. The fact of the matter is, some demographics prefer different stuff than other ones. When you have a certain audience that already likes something, then appeal to that particular audience. Appealing to an audience who has no interest in the first place isn't going to make anyone happy, and no one's going to like your game. We see this exact same thing happen time and time again when people try to do this just in general, but the time it happens most often is when it comes to women as a whole, because people in general, both men and women, want to appease women. Women have solidarity with other women. Men have a vested interest in making women happy. So people make stupid decisions, which they'd never do in any other situation with any other demographic. So girl gamers are a very notable case study where this happens on a fairly regular basis. Frequent enough that we can actually see this happening in real time, where there will be some huge controversy where a group, usually feminist or social justice warriors or whatever, will show up and make complaints about a game, pointing out it's not female friendly enough. The design team tries to make the game more female friendly, and the women that already played the game because they liked the way it played get annoyed and quit because it's not doing the stuff they liked anymore. The guys who played the game tend to put up with crap a bit longer, but then they're just going to quit the game too when it ceases to be the game they used to play, because it's no longer appealing to them. And what of the original complainants? Well, they're still complaining because the game's still rooted in the original concept too much to appeal to this broader female demographic. The game doesn't gain nearly enough new female players to make up for everyone who left, because the game simply can't appeal to them enough without changing the entire game at a fundamental level, which would basically mean building an entirely new game. The complaints continue that the game's not female friendly enough, which further helps to keep the women who might have tried playing it anyway from trying it at all. And the game dies, stuck in some weird limbo state where it's not enough of the game it was to appeal to the previous audience any longer, but it's not enough of the game that it would need to become to appeal to the new audience. This has nothing to do with women, is the thing. Do this with any set of demographics, and you'll see the exact same thing play out pretty much every time, unless the demographics are close enough together that it only requires minimal changes or a shift in marketing focus to draw in the new group. When there are rather large sections that simply don't appeal to the new demographic, though, the game flops. You can see this in another example. Games which change genre in the sequel. If you already had a large built-up fan base, then you know who your audience already is. A small shift to include another similar demographic can work out fine. Going from like horror to a suspense horror genre is probably going to maintain your previous player base and add some new groups into the mix as well. That's probably fine because they're fairly similar and share a lot of tastes. And while there are some significant differences, they're small enough that you can probably market it to both demographics without too much trouble. When you see games that shift dramatically, however, well, let's look at an example. Plants vs. Zombies. The original game was a cute, silly tower defense game that appealed to quite a large audience. One of the sequels, Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, however, well, it changed from being a fairly straightforward and simple click-based tower defense game to a 3D third-person shooter/tower defense game. Now this wasn't a bad game, but the problem here is that it had a much smaller set of target audiences which it would appeal to compared to the original game. And they cut out a lot of people who already liked it by adding some pretty large differences and elements to the fundamental gameplay they didn't want. The game wound up with mixed reviews, some positive ones, but it didn't really make it to the hit sales in nearly the same way the original did. The direct sequel to the original was a free-to-play version, which only released on mobile platforms, again cutting out large sections of potential player base, and again it didn't do nearly as well. See, the thing is that you tend to have to stick to your core player base. You can expand outward in directions that include your original players and add some more on top of that. But don't try to alienate your established player base to attract a new group who has no interest in what you're offering. If you want to do that, make a whole new game under a different intellectual property. It's more work, but it'll work out better for everyone, just in general. For your first few games, though, whether they're tabletop RPGs or video games or whatever, try to keep them pretty closely grouped together in who your target audience is. That audience will be more interested in following you if you consistently make games or novels or movies or anything else that they like, and you'll be generally able to use more of the lessons you learned in your previous games on the new ones. Like, I've mostly worked with RPGs throughout my career. Most of it was in video games. Some of it was fantasy novels, which are similar. Some of the games were more modern, but still RPG based. Because of this, I know a lot about different kinds of RPGs, and how to combine their good aspects together, what works and what doesn't. I've learned which audiences tend to be around for each of these variations, and where the overlaps are. Not all of them, but I've got a pretty good understanding of it in general now that I didn't have when I first started out. As such, what was my first solo development I'm doing on my own? Well, look at the rest of this channel. Saorsa is built specifically around appealing to a few different player bases I've specifically got experience with, who also tend to overlap to some degree. Now, if you're just starting out, you may not know where to begin. You may not know which audiences like certain things, or how to shift the balance of favoring one group over another. It's a trial and error thing to an extent. Some stuff you just need to learn firsthand, and I can't really just tell you what the answers will be. Either because I don't know myself, or maybe no one knows yet because it hasn't been tried before. What I can tell you in general, though, is get a feel for what your players like and do more of the stuff that gets good feedback and less of the stuff that gets negative feedback. Specifically from the people who are already playing the game. Don't worry too much about what people who don't even want to play the game have to say, because they have other games they can go play instead, which is fine. If you really want to cater to them, make a new game from scratch for them, but don't try to cater to people who don't have an interest in your game to start with. This sounds really blatantly obvious, but as we just covered, this isn't always what designers do. Often they go hunting down a new demographic and throw out the one they already had in the process, but don't capture the new one either. Again, this is fairly common when it comes to the specific case of trying to get more women into gaming. Here's the thing. The women who like to play games already do play games. We play games because we like how they already are. If you change everything to appeal to female gamers, the women who play games already are probably going to stop playing your game in particular, because you changed the stuff we liked, and the rest of the women don't like games in general, so aren't going to play your game anyway. I know I keep bringing up the girl gamers thing, but sadly I have to, because it's a fairly consistent problem that people think we need to get women to do stuff they don't want to do. Why? Why does that even sound like a good idea to anyone? I could actually go into detail as to why this is, but it's not needed for this video. All you really need to know is that chasing a demographic that doesn't care about your game and is probably never going to care about your game is kind of a bad decision just in general. Figure out who likes the style of the game you're making and tailor fit your game to those people, and you'll generally do much better overall. Note that this doesn't mean you can't branch out into a wider audience. Just don't throw out your core audience while you go looking for others to add to the mix. 99% plus of the time, it doesn't work. Sure, sometimes there are very, very rare exceptions where it does work, but for the time and effort invested, it's not worth it to play the lottery blindly on your demographics. Anyway, this should be common sense here, but this series is called Fundamental Fantasy for a reason. We need to go into the basics because people actually screw up on these things pretty often, even professionals. So, I think we've actually covered that well enough for today, so with that, I'm out. I'll see you next time!